Hello everyone and welcome back to the World War II Solitaire board game channel. Today we're going to do an unboxing of another rare game, another game that is quite unheard of, and it's The Winds of War, designed by Richard Berg and released by LPS. You can get this game from Against the Odds magazine website. You will find a link in the description. It's only $21.95 shipped in the US or $34.95 shipped internationally. This game has, just like Terrible Swift Swordfish, quite a unique backstory and quite a unique theme. As we can read here is Japan strikes back at America. Massive transoceanic bombing attacks by balloon. And complete simulation including a map, 120 counters, and they're all in full color. And we're going to go ahead and take a closer look at the components of this game. But before we do so, I will tell you a little bit about this Japanese operation against the US. If you're just interested in the unboxing itself, go ahead and skip ahead a few minutes. Otherwise, take a seat and listen to this really cool story. So basically, these balloons, they were called Fugo balloons, which were something like bomb balloons. And the Japanese, during World War II, they launched a lot of these guys. And they're hydrogen balloons, which were carrying either anti-personnel bombs or incendiary bombs. And they were just basically launched in the air from Japan, and when they were launched afterwards they couldn't control them in any way possible, but they knew that the jet stream, they had done intensive research, and they knew that the jet stream would carry them in 3 to 4 days all the way to the US. And that's what happened. About 10% of the balloons launched actually made it all the way to the US. And interestingly enough is also that it was actually the first ever weapon in history that possessed intercontinental range. So that's kind of cool. And from late 44 to early 45, Japan launched over 9,000 of these, and about 10% reached the US. So that's about 900 to 1,000 balloons. And they, like I said, they had anti-personnel bombs, and they also had incendiary bombs. And the goal of this Japanese operation was for the incendiary bombs to start forest fires, and and for the anti-personnel bombs, of course, to damage civilians and whatnot. And you know, it was meant to create like a big panic among the civilian population of the US, as well as they were hoping that the fires that were supposed to be created by the incendiary bombs were going to keep a lot of the resources from the US, shooting down these balloons, worrying about where they could start fires, and having to fight those fires. So that was the goal of the whole thing. But unfortunately, that was, or maybe we should say fortunately, but unfortunately for the Japanese during the times, is that it didn't really work. They were launched quite late in the year, so the incendiary bombs, they did not really start a lot of fires because, you know, there was snow, there wasn't this dry climate. And I know of one fire actually that this balloon started, and that fire did injure 20 people fighting that fire, and actually killed one person. But other than that, they didn't really do anything at all. And the people of the US, which were meant to be fearing these balloons and panicking, they didn't even know of it, because the US kept a lid on it. The US started knowing about it, and they specifically wrote to the media saying, okay, so don't do any journalism about this, because we don't want the Japanese to know how this operation is going, and we don't want the civilian population to freak out. And one very tragic thing about this was that in May 1945, a pregnant woman with her husband, a minister, and 5 Sunday school children were going for a picnic. And while the minister was parking his car, the children and the pregnant woman discovered one of these balloons. And it looked like, they're not sure, but I think one of the children kicked this balloon and the balloon exploded. And these 5 children, Sunday school children, and the pregnant woman, I think she was 26 years old, unfortunately they all died. And those are the only casualties from 9,000, over 9,000 balloons launched. Those are the only direct casualties. And then we have the one guy who died from the forest fire, which was most likely done by one of these balloons. So the only thing they did was kill, okay, that's 6 people too many, obviously very tragic, but you can understand that the operation wasn't very successful. So in late 45, I believe in April, they launched the last balloons, and then they just stopped the project. And this, I could keep talking about this forever, but I'm not gonna do so, don't worry. But this is a very interesting subject, so I recommend you to Google Fugu balloons. But another, I think, part of the story which is very interesting is that the US, when they started discovering all of these balloons, they were freaking out like, oh, where are these balloons coming from? They thought perhaps the Japanese had submarines launching them, or they even thought maybe German prisoner of wars in the POW camps are releasing them, and they even thought that the Japanese civilians that were, locked up in these internment camps, maybe they are releasing them. But no, it was school children mainly sewing these balloons together. Then they were launched from Japan, and the US could never really, believe that. But the balloons themselves, because they were flowing all the way from Japan, during the day when the sun was up, they would tend to rise, and then there would be a really complicated system in here in the balloons. And they had sandbags, and then they would automatically drop 2 of the sandbags. And during the night, they could go down. Okay, it should be the other way around. During the night they went down, and if they went too far down, they would cut the sandbags. If it went too far up during the sunny days, they would open some valves and blow out some of the hydrogen in the balloons. So a very complicated system. But due to these sandbags, the Americans actually found one of these sandbags, and they analyzed the sand and figured out from what part of the world, from what part of Japan the sand came from. And then they sent the 20th Air Force to bomb those hydrogen factories. So actually I think they bombed, not all of them, but most of the factories producing the hydrogen for the balloons. So I think that's another pretty cool part of the story. Anyway, about these balloons, they're still found today. I read that at least in 2019, they found one of these balloons. A hunter found one of them in Canada. And there is still one of these balloons, which you can see. There are several of them in different museums, but I know there is a whole balloon, which you can see in Ottawa, in the Canadian War Museum. You can see a complete balloon, Japanese balloon, so that's really cool. And the last thing I'm going to mention before we start opening up this bad boy is that first when I heard of it, I was like, this got to be a joke. But actually, this was going on with more countries in World War II and other wars. And the UK, the British, they actually had something called Operation Outward. So you might want to Google that, Operation Outward, where they did the same thing against the Germans, but instead of the Japanese, they launched about 9,000. The British, they actually launched about 100,000 balloons, and they were super cheap, and they were far more successful because they cut off power, and they started fires, and they started fires in buildings and in fields, in forests. So it was evaluated after the war that the operation was actually successful for the British, because the cost of the balloons, I think it was 91 pounds, great British pounds today they would cost, was actually far less than what the Germans had to pay to repair and to keep all all the fires under control and so on. So that's Operation Outward. And now I'm gonna stop babbling because I know I'm a nerd and I really nerded down in this subject. We are gonna go ahead and open up this bag now and check this game out. So there's also a funny story of how this game came to be. The designer actually on a game forum said he wanted a challenge and said, I can do a game about anything. So give me a few examples of subjects that you don't think I could make a game of. And people suggested different things, and this was the thing he decided to do a game about. The balloon wars against the US. Okay, so here we have the front. We see an example of the games. And then we have the map, and just like the other mini games of LPS, we have also our rules here. Sorry, let me focus on the map. So here we have the main map with the Japanese victory points, north up here, balloon groups, Japanese activity, US resources, and balloon effect table. Let's take a closer look at that. We can see different kind of terrain. And then we have our rules here. And one thing to note with the rules is that this is a two-player game, but you can play it solo. And I don't know how the solo works because it's what I read on Boardgame Geek, it says 1 to 2 players, and on LPS, or sorry, Against the Odds magazine's website, it says that this game plays solo well. But if you play 2 people, the one person have to monkey around with Japanese balloons. So I'm not sure if this is actually going to have a dedicated solo mode or if it's going to be more of a kind of a two-handed type of play. I'm not sure, but we will look at that in the future because of course I'm going to do a playthrough video of this game. So we have an introduction here, so let's read that. Winds of War is a game on the efforts of the Japanese during World War II to create chaos, confusion, and consternation, I don't even know that word, consternation, in the United States by bombing the western portion of the country by means of explosives carried in wind-borne, hydrogen-filled balloons. Winds of War is a game. Any hints of simulation are just that, hints. Although everything in the game is based on what actually happened. It's a bit of a hoot, but it doesn't take long to play, about 2 hours, and it's much in the spirit of what the game industry calls Euros. The game may be played by 1 or 2 players. No game designer in his right mind would ever think of doing a game on this subject. I, to be sure, am not of the right-minded tribe. The origins of this game arise from a statement I made on Consume World that there is no subject about which one cannot design a game. Consume World being what it is, it took about 38 seconds before a half a dozen "oh yeah, prove it" statements followed. The result was a folder entitled The Richard M. Berg Game Design Challenge, wherein dozens of titles were suggested. These were narrowed down to half a dozen prime-time possibilities by a panel of purported experts who, from that half dozen, chose this subject as ungameable. Me? I would have thought the Children's Crusade would be a lot more difficult. But I have accepted that challenge, and this is what comes from such public foolishness. Okay, so here we have the game board again. We have the rules here, and then we also have quite a lot of variant rules. We have the US Coast Guard, the Japanese submarine, and Seiran float plane. And then on the back of this, I think, yep, it's just white. And then we have our 120 counters. All of this comes in a plastic bag. So let's look at that. So here we have our Fugo Japanese balloons. I know they're also called something like Bakudan, but I can't remember what. And I believe these are something like probably terrain counters, because if we look at the other side, here we have, I believe this is going to be desert, so that's not going to have any effect. Then we have woods. See if I can turn this around. Woods, and I guess that is heavy industry and something like cities. And here we have fields. So really beautiful little cute counters here. And then we have some more counters. Very patriotic. We have a beautiful plane there. And I don't know what these counters do, but I intend to find out. And on the back of these, Coast Guard, submarine, sail on attack, balloon activities. I'm guessing these are going to be for those optional rule variants. Most probably. Okay guys, so that is the Winds of War. Thank you very much for watching. I thank you if you did listen to my rambling there for 5-10 minutes about the Japanese and the British balloon bombs. Thank you for that. Also, like I said, there is going to be a playthrough video of this game, so if that's something that you would like to watch, please stay tuned to the channel. A good idea is to subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you don't miss out. There is that little bell symbol which you can click and you will get a notification whenever I post a video or make an update. Again, you can get this game at Against the Odds magazine website. You'll find the link in the description. $21.95 US shipped in the US, or $34.95 shipped internationally. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.